What's going on, guys? So I just got done watching the newest episode of the Clone Wars, so I kind of wanted to share some of my thoughts on the episode as well as this arc as a whole. Now, with the Bad Batch episodes that started off this season, I definitely think I could have talked about those episodes one at a time, but for whatever reason, I just felt that it would be easier to talk about this latest arc in one video. So let's get into it, shall we? So I'm gonna be honest, this arc really didn't do that much for me. Now, it definitely wasn't bad, and seeing Ahsoka again, you know, after all this time, was really awesome, but the episodes just kind of felt underwhelming to me, and, you know, not that much happened that was interesting. So I'm gonna, you know, just talk about some of my general points on the arc as a whole. It's not gonna be an in-depth, in-order analysis of each episode, so let's just see what I have to say. Now, the Bad Batch episodes, while I thought that they were very good, it was also kind of distracting because, you know, I had seen the original storyboards. Like, for those of you who don't know, after the Clone Wars was canceled, they did a project called the Clone Wars Legacy, which that they released certain Clone Wars episodes, you know, as other stories. You know, we got a book, we got a comic miniseries, and certain episodes were released as unfinished storyboards, and the Bad Batch was one of those arcs. So while the finished Bad Batch episodes were really good, it could also be distracting at times knowing what was happening already, and you know, knowing what the changes were, like what changes they made from the original storyboard. And to an extent, that kind of distracted me at the beginning, because in the original version of this episode, Ahsoka was actually supposed to meet a different character whose name I can't remember, but in this episode they changed it to the Martez sisters, which at first I didn't understand why they made this change, but then I saw someone online who they put in a way that made sense. Like, instead of giving Ahsoka another budding romance with the character who was originally supposed to be in the episode, they replaced him with fellow young women who Ahsoka could, you know, just focus on being friends with and learning more about their walk of life and contributing to Ahsoka's changing view of the Jedi Order and the Republic. So while it was distracting at first, I did kind of understand why they went with it, and I decided I could roll with it. And this is just a thing about the season in general, but I'm still really not a huge fan of how they've changed the opening narration. Like, they do these weird transparent changes that look kind of odd, and I don't really like it. So that's not this episode or this arc specifically, that's just something they're doing in general with the opening narration. It's another thing that's kind of distracting that I'm not a huge fan of. It also feels that the editing could have been a little tighter, and that each episode in this arc could have been a little shorter. I can appreciate that they're taking advantage of the fact that they're on a streaming service now and can have a little more time for the episodes to breathe, but I already feel this arc was dragged out a little more than necessary, so I just feel that making the editing a little tighter could have made each episode, you know, move at a better pace. I have to admit that I do have mixed feelings on the Martez sisters. I like Trace well enough, and she has a lot of moments to shine, and she's a good friend to Ahsoka, but her sister Rafa obviously can be very annoying at times, which, to be fair, that was the point, and you definitely understand more as the arc goes on why Rafa is the way she is, but that doesn't change that at the beginning she was a very annoying character to have to deal with. I do really like seeing how the downtrodden people of Coruscant and the galaxy view the Jedi Order, and it continues to contribute to Ahsoka's changing view of the Jedi. In fact, the moment in, I think it was episode 3, where Trace, you know, tells what happened to her family and how the Jedi treated her and her sister afterwards, was a really rare moment of making the Jedi seem like they were the bad guys, which, you know, that was not the Jedi's intent, and you understand, but just the way the sisters explained it, it was a really surprising moment that you can tell clearly impacted Ahsoka on a deep level. So I thought that was a great moment. Another moment I loved was seeing Ahsoka call Anakin her older brother. I mean, it just shows how close the two of them were, how much they had grown over the course of the previous seasons, and you can tell how much it hurt Ahsoka to have to walk away from the Order. As I said before, one of my problems with this arc is that I feel it was dragged out too much. Like, the third episode, while it was good, also kind of felt unnecessary, because think about it, you know, the only things that you have to accomplish in episodes 3 and 4 are showing the Mandalorians so that, you know, Ahsoka can become a part of the Siege of Mandalore arc. You have to show them all escaping, and so I just feel feel that, you know, episodes 3 and 4 could have been, and even to an extent episode 2 could have been combined together so that this was just a 3-episode arc, because think about it, why do you have to have an entire episode of them trying to break out only for them to end up back in prison? It could have just been a simple job, like, you know, they are low-level criminals who happen to get a job delivering spice, it goes south, now they have to escape, and so, you know, I just feel that the arc was dragged out more than it needed to be. I also really liked the moment where Ahsoka and the sisters fly past Anakin's ship, and Anakin senses her but decides to let her go on her way. It was a little distracting how similar it was to Vader sensing Luke in Return of the Jedi, like it was a shot-for-shot remake of that scene, but that was kind of the point, so it was a really nice moment. I also thought it was a really powerful moment where they arrive on Kessel and show that there are like thousands of slaves working in the spice mines. It connects to several other Star Wars stories like Master and Apprentice, which goes into the subject of slavery in the galaxy in a lot more detail. I recommend checking out that book. And obviously it connects to Solo, a Star Wars story, Star Wars Rebels, stuff like that. But just in the context of the episode, it really shows the characters, like what they're really getting into, and, you know, makes them question, maybe, you know, getting paid for doing this job isn't worth being involved with people who do stuff like this. And it also, again, you know, this is continuing Ahsoka's arc of, you know, no longer fully believing in the Jedi, and, you know, they point out that the Jedi, you know, should be doing something about this, that the Republic should be doing something about this, but they're not. I was also wondering how they were going to tie this episode into the Siege of Mandalore arc, since a lot of the original episodes they were going to do before the series got cancelled can no longer be done. So I thought having some Mandalorians on world, you know, trying to get intel on Maul and then happening to come across Ahsoka was a really smart way to bring her into that arc. And speaking of which, I love the scene where Maul shows up. He talked about Crimson Dawn, which is obviously, you know, a connection to Solo, a Star Wars story, and it really makes me excited to see him in the series finale and to get into all that stuff. This does bring up a question though, because I wonder how they're going to explain the events of the Darth Maul Son of Dathomir comic series for people who aren't familiar with that story. As I mentioned before, the Clone Wars Legacy project was taking some unfinished Clone Wars episodes and telling them in other mediums, and one of those was Darth Maul Son of Dathomir, a comic series that showed what happened after Sidious defeated Darth Maul in season 5, but obviously they can't turn that into an episode now because it's already been turned into a comic, so I assume they're just going to, you know, explain it in the opening narration or just have Maul say what happened, but, you know, I kind of wonder how they're going to do that in a way that's going to be effective before they have to get to the final episodes. Another thing, getting to the end of the 4th episode, I thought Ahsoka maybe could have revealed sooner that she was a Jedi so that the sisters would have had more time to feel betrayed by it, but then come around by the end. And I also thought at the end of the episode, Ahsoka's, you know, friendship with the sisters, them all forgiving each other, and then Ahsoka deciding to go to Mandalore was all resolved a little too quickly, but that's really just a nitpick. I know it sounds like I'm being really hard on this arc, but really, I thought it was fine. It may not have blown me away, but it was still good. The Clone Wars has always been an anthology series, meaning that some arcs will wow me and others will just be okay. This arc is mostly set up anyway, meant to transition from Ahsoka leaving the Jedi to joining the Mandalorians, so in that regard, it did its job. I'm very excited to finally get to the Siege of Mandalore next week. Not only are these the episodes I've been most excited to see, but they're the ones we've been shown the least about. Dave Filoni did show a storyboard in 2016 about one sequence from the series finale would look like. We know the general plot, and some details have been glimpsed in other media, but we haven't been shown any animatics like we did for other Season 7 episodes. I'm very excited to see the Clone Wars finally get the end it deserves, so I'll see you guys next week for that. If this is your first time on my channel, be sure to leave a like, comment, and consider subscribing. It really means a lot. Also, be sure to check out my other videos and follow me on Instagram. That's all for now. Stay safe and have a great day.